can think of chirp flares, 2-click chirp flares, Joe Cooley's. There's the ones with the ghost click, and there's ones where the click sits in between the tear sound. We're talking about the former with the ghost click. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name's Sy, and today we're going to be talking about advanced chirp scratch techniques. Or semi-advanced, depending on how good you are. We're going to break down some awesome DJ Hype combos at the end as well, so stick around if you're interested. Hype! So chirps are obviously a pretty versatile scratch, but you don't often hear too many people talking about combos you can do with them. Maybe it's because they combo so well with everything else that people just don't bother. Like off the top of my head, I can think of chirp flares, 2-click chirp flares, Joe Cooley's. I thought I'd share a few combos that I've picked up over the years that I think are slightly more interesting. No more messing around, let's get into it. A lot of chirps you hear tend to come in like big long strings of them back to back for whatever reason, but it doesn't have to necessarily be this way. What we're basically going to be doing is leaving the fader closed every now and again whilst doing chirps to break up this kind of continuous chirping sound that we often get. It took me a while of doing this to realise it's basically the same idea as the seesaw scratch. We're not doing it alternating every single sound, we're just throwing in a new gap here and there. This technique was actually quite hard for me to learn, as I was essentially unlearning the habit of continuously chirping. Often getting out of habits is harder than just learning something from scratch, I find. No pun intended. Dear oh dear. Chirp tear flares. I personally learnt these from ErikUK, and he used to do them with either hand on deck, and he'd get the whole room looking at him like, what the fuck? Because he made them sound crazy. Basically, you're combining tear flares with chirps and randomly mixing these up in 1s and 2s or whatever you feel like to make these really cool combos. So if you don't know, there are two types of tear flare. There's the ones with the ghost click, and there's ones where the click sits in between the tear sound. We're talking about the former with the ghost click. Tear flares probably deserve a tutorial all on their own, but I did mention them in my Prism tutorial up here, and also I'll put the link in the description. Tear flares combine really nicely with chirps once you get into the flow. Just mix it up between singles and doubles of each, as I mentioned before, and bounce between them for variation. If you can do bumpy knuckles, as Erik used to call them, or whip tears, as I believe Dopez calls them, it becomes much easier to make this a kind of fluid movement. That's another tutorial I have in the pipeline, so depending on when you watch this video, it may or may not already be in the description. If not, hang tight, it's on its way. Hey lads, I'm just going to interrupt this video to ask you guys to click like and share. It really helps the channel no end. I can happily say lads because literally 98.8% of my subscribers are male. My goal this year is to hit 10,000 subs, which sounds like quite a bit. Basically, when I can get to 10k subs, supposedly we can go down to the YouTube studios, which are literally just down the road from me in King's Cross. And we're allowed to use the studios and kind of make our own content there. I have a ton of ideas of fun stuff we can do down there, and we'll have access to all their cameras and lighting and all that kind of thing. So I'm thinking DJ performances, beat making challenges, scratch jams, and just cool stuff like that, basically. I'd really like to make this happen as soon as possible so that it could possibly get down there when lockdown lifts or whatever. But yeah, thank you so much for subscribing, and peace. The next combo we're going to talk about is backwards chirp releases, or whatever you want to call them. They're just kind of simple scratch actually, but they sound really cool. I guess this combo isn't really anything too crazy, but I don't often hear people doing it. I borrowed it from listening to this old drum and bass mix by DJ Hype, and it's a really cool technique which sounds super dope. So stay tuned and I'll show you. To make the scratch work, we're basically just starting on a back pull of the chirp, which I think straight away a lot of people don't do, and that allows us to do a release and then start again doing the backwards chirps. In the mix I mentioned, DJ Hype then chucks in some dope babies in place of chirps to add in some even more variation. Honestly, it's just some really dope scratching that sounds clear, deliberate and well defined. And yeah, it still sounds up to this day, I think. So fair play, DJ Hype, you absolutely killed it. A scratching video by me wouldn't be right if I didn't at least mention pitching once. We often do chirps double time because who doesn't love double time chirps? But I noticed this can also lead to our chirps sounding really nasty and high pitched a lot of the time. And I know that I certainly used to do this, and I've definitely seen other people at scratch jams do this too. Just because we're scratching fast doesn't mean we need to pitch our scratches fast too. This concept really goes with any scratch. The speed you're doing the scratch at doesn't necessarily have to dictate the pitch that you're getting out of the record. I'm not saying this is a hard and fast rule. Obviously, sometimes you want to go fast, but just make sure it's like a conscious decision and you're not just doing something because you don't know any better, essentially. Anyway, I think that's all I'm going to cover in this video. There are plenty of other combos that have already been well documented on the interwebs, and I'm sure you can find those easily enough. Here's my video on prisms that I mentioned, and also, depending when you're watching this, my other video on whip tears may or may not already be up here. Peas and carrots, y'all.